Hi everyone, my name is Jesse. I'm in the College of Arts and Sciences studying biochemistry and molecular biology, but my project's a little different. It's titled People, Food, and Culture, The Connection Through Photography, and my amazing advisor, Professor Tony Pepper, helped me through this all. So I mentioned I was a biochemistry major, so I thought I'd touch on why I chose photography. In summer of 2020, during COVID, I got my first camera. And from there, I knew I always wanted to just have a more artistic side, and I chose the camera because I was never really good at drawing, writing, or music, or anything like that. So it was a way for me to express myself through an artistic lens. Fast forward a few years, I started freelancing, doing events and traveling after COVID ended, and even started doing weddings as well. Today, I still do most of all those things, but I'm switching more towards an artistic expression and documenting my memories as a primary use for my camera. So that's the photography part of my project. But what about the people, food, and culture part? So people, food, and culture, for me, maybe food was comfort for me, and it made me feel really cared for and loved growing up. It kind of tied into my identity as a first-generation Chinese American. And there's this common Asian trope that Asian parents don't say, "I love you," or they don't show affection the same way as some other cultures. Instead, they ask you questions like, "Are you hungry?" Or they'll give you a bowl of fruit after a long day's work or studying. All of these led to a positive association to food for me. And growing up, it was a big part of my life, and I wasn't allowed to also go out much, but for the few times I did, I had meals at local restaurants with my friends and family as well. Because of this, it became a common theme throughout my teenage years and grew into appreciation for cooking and the culture behind the food. And to that point, my comment app was also about the cultural variability of tacos and fusion food. So that's where we are now. We have this deep connection with food. I'm sure some of you guys, or most of you guys, can relate. But that wasn't always the case. For hundreds and thousands of years, humanity's quest for food has really helped shape society. Ancestors from Homo erectus to the early Homo sapiens viewed food more as a necessity and a scarcity as hunter-gatherers. And this used as a means of survival, which allowed us to grow into the early civilization we have today. So with that, the meaning of food evolved as well. Connections today can be found in three examples. For example, religion through dietary taboos, science through medicinal diets used in the 1800s, as well as the early foundations of chemistry based on cooking. Additionally, societal views have been progressed through food as well, where wars have been dictated by harvest seasons, and certain classes and certain foods have been associated with certain classes in higher or lower. Today, eating and drinking have been increasingly studied by scholars as constituent elements and reproduction of local, regional, and national cultures, and specifically in Europe. And that led to my primary historical motivator for my project, the formation of restaurants following the fall of Louis XVI. Royal chefs were out of a job, forced to adapt, and serve the bourgeoisie class in early renditions of a restaurant where the rich gathered and exchanged ideas. Because of this, Paris was seen as a birthplace of the modern restaurant. So that led to my question: how do people connect with food today in a culinary rich and diverse city such as Paris? Luckily, I had the chance to actually go this past winter break, and I stayed in the 10th and 20th arrondissement. I stayed about 3 weeks, and I chose these places because they're, of cost reasons, good access to transportation, but also because they're in a less touristy area of Paris that allowed me to experience the local culture better. And with that came a lot of challenges. The first one was a language barrier. I don't speak any French. I never took any French in high school or anything like that. So getting around was hard at first, but I soon learned that a lot of people do speak English, and I picked up on the few words that I need to know. There's also the problem of street journalism in France. In US, it's legal to take pictures in the street on public settings, but in France, the laws are a lot more vague and up to discretion of the police, and I obviously didn't want to get in trouble. So navigating that was hard, and I had a few instances where people saw me taking photos or videos and politely asked me to get rid of the photos, and I did. Lastly, photographing restaurants was also hard because I reached out to about 100 restaurants, and a lot of these restaurants are what is known as haute cuisine, which is high-class cuisine, very expensive restaurants, and they don't really want a college student going around the back of their kitchen, messing around, taking photos, and interrupting their service. I had a lot of rejections, but I had a few acceptances that I got to visit the restaurants, and I chose one restaurant that I'll dive deeper into. And with those challenges come figuring it out. So I was really pushing outside my comfort zone. It was my first time solo traveling in a big city. I was there for 3 weeks, and it was a lot to figure out. I had to learn to be a local, learn the local tendencies, have an easier time to converse with people, and respecting certain things that are first nature to them, but not for me. I also would push myself to talk to a lot of people. Paris is a very diverse city. 50% of the population are immigrants or first-generation descendants of immigrants. And that came with lots of stories and traditions carrying on with food. One example that I want to share is that I met someone who ran a Facebook group called Hungry Expatriates, basically a bunch of immigrants with ties to their own food coming together at local apartments, restaurants to talk and just exchange ideas of their own culture and backgrounds. And that leads me to the restaurant Tekke's, which is a French and Middle Eastern fusion restaurant. Tekke's was the restaurant I chose because it was a place that I felt most connected to. And that's because they allowed me to see the whole service from setup to the actual serve itself, to cleaning up, and then a little celebration afterwards. And I also had a chance to dine with them as well. My server, who I'll talk about a little bit after, gave me such a great experience and just talked to me about the whole menu, made me feel really welcome. And I got to see, the first day I was there, they walked up to me, you can see on the bottom right picture. He hands me a drink and says, "Tonight you are one of us," and that's when I knew that this restaurant was the one that we'd be choosing. So going into the 5 parts, as you see through the photo book that I'm passing around, first one was mise en place, which stands for everything in place, basically the prep of all the ingredients for the night. Everyone was really busy, really lively, and really energetic for dinner service, and these services can last for 5 hours depending on how many reservations they have that day. Next was the family meal. Some of you might have watched the show The Bear, which are familiar with this word. Basically, it's pretty similar. They get together, have a great meal, kind of decompress, relax a little bit before a long night. And during that meal at the end, they have this little meeting talking about changes to the menu, anything that's happening, and just making sure everyone's on tip-top shape for the night. Next was the service itself. It was very energetic, lots of people. It's a very intimate location as well. You have options to have big group dinings as well as a little more intimate options at the bar where the chef serves you specifically. You can see them cooking and they talk to you and engage you throughout the whole dinner. Lastly was the closing part where everyone's cleaning up, everyone was really tired. This is around 12 or 1 a.m. at this point, so everyone's just getting ready to end the night. The night that I came was especially special, though, because it was a celebration of a Middle Eastern holiday and a staff birthday. As you can see the picture second from the right, these people are complete strangers that happen to be dining for the night, but because they were there, they got to celebrate the staff member's birthday with them, and everyone just came together as this big, happy family for that moment without even knowing each other. So I talked about meeting the staff and making those connections, but there's 3 people that I specifically met and talked to the most. Natita, which is the one I was in contact with for the majority of the time, she's the manager, and she basically directs the whole team. During family meal, she always has this dessert called choquettes, which she shares with the whole team as a little reward, almost like orange slices during a soccer game to get everyone ready. Next was Paul, the sous chef, who was a bit of a more stoic individual, a lot more quiet and reserved. And his favorite item was French onion soup that he loved to combine with naan bread. Lastly was Jeremy, my server, who was an ex-engineer and loved fondue bourguignon to share with his family. And as I pass around, there's 3 final projects, 3 photo works that represent these people's lives and the food, the connections they have, as well as a photo album of the experience that I had. And lastly, I just want to extend a big thank you to my advisor, Tony Pepe, at Kilachand Honors College, and the staff at Tekke's.
Okay, are there any questions?
Hello. Your photographs ended up amazing. I was looking through the photo book and your editing, and all the shots are just so great. But I was wondering, were there any pictures that you really liked, or maybe that didn't make it into the picture book that you had a story behind?
There was a lot of pictures. I took a lot of photos that night. Some of the ones were more intimate between the staff members themselves that I didn't feel had a place in the photo book. There's one photo of them dancing in the middle of, at the end of service during closing, which I thought was a good moment to capture, but not exactly something I wanted to share with the whole world. It was like a moment that I wanted to keep treasured for themselves. So I did end up sending these pictures to them.
Great job again on your presentation. Since when you went to Paris, you did like, you immersed yourself more in the culture, like when you went to Tickets and you did that whole thing. How did that change kind of your view of like specifically Paris as like an American, I guess?
I mean, there's this common stigma that in Paris, people aren't too friendly to foreigners. I definitely had my fair share of experiences with that, but the majority of people were actually very nice. And Tickets especially really solidified that for me. They kind of showed me that everyone really like, cares for people. It just shows, they show it in a different way.
This is a question more about your photography in general. You mentioned your photography journey, and if you were to go back to your younger self when you were just getting started or just doing portraits or whatever, and now you've moved to more artistic expression, what would you go back and tell your kind of first year photography self?
That's hard. Definitely just try more things, do everything you can. I think in the beginning I kind of focused in on the more commercial side of things and not the artistic side. I didn't realize how much I would like it. So when I finally expanded, I met some friends in that industry, in that field, doing more artistic expressions, going to concerts and stuff like that. It made me realize that this is a part that I wanted to explore as well.
Are there any more questions? Okay, thank you very much.